All right, so this is an extremely brief introduction to help you identify what good criticism looks like so that you don't get tricked by the hordes of overconfident reviewers out there who are wrong about like 80 to 100% of the shit they say. All right, so number one principle about art: art is about one thing, one goal: articulation of identity. Information is the tool you use to articulate the identity. Information works as a network. It synergizes with the other information. And this synergy is going to be the highest source of information in any good work. You think about art. Art is a way of describing the universe, essentially. The universe is composed of inherent core archetypal components, which is very much the opposite of like what postmodern thinkers will have you believe. And so this is why technically religion and art are actually basically the same thing, just going about it a little differently. Both are organizing and articulating the inherent themes of life to you. And so artists are working with the components of life. They did not create the components of life. They're just working with them. A human being was a thing before the artist says this character is a human being. That already existed, human beings. And therefore, the artist has to acknowledge the inherent patterns that come with, say, a human being if they're making it. Or even if it's a made-up thing, like an alien, it has to conform to like the concept of an alien inherently. So the creation process will begin with an artist's grasp of the identity of the work they're going to create. Then they utilize some form of language, aka medium, to convey this identity that they decide upon. Like written narrative, art, music, those are all languages to describe an identity. And so culturally, when people are referring to quality, like what is the quality of this work, like what a critic is supposed to rate, they are referring to the use of language by that work. How well did this thing articulate its identity? Like how vivid and how articulate is the language used? All right, so let's apply this shit to anime. And remember that every point I'm about to make could have like an entire 10-hour course. Like every little bullet point could have like a 10-hour course from this godlike mind of mine. So one sentence is not enough to do it justice, but let's just treat this as like an organizational reference. This is a great organizational reference. All right, so first thing is the broad category of writing in anime. Subcategory would be plot. Is the structure good, or does it spend unnecessary time on like less relevant material and not enough time on relevant material? Are there enough scenes in the plot with interesting function, or does the author just need to throw in scenes that don't actually move the plot or tone forward? Does it have a calculated relationship with viewer expectation, or does it seem to just randomly subvert viewer expectation without any proper justification? Does the plot make proper use of each of the main and side characters, or are there characters that neither add to the plot nor tone? And then we got sekai-kan, which is a word I like to use a lot. It's the Japanese word, literally translates to worldview, but it means like setting and character setting. So for your sekai-kan, are all the archetypal roles that the story in question demands filled by at least one character? Or do we feel like that there could be a really interesting, necessary character that just doesn't exist in this story? Is the setting integrated into the characters, or does it just feel like an obligatory backdrop? Is the characters integrated into the setting, or does it just feel like the author got carried away with world building for the sake of world building? Are the character settings compatible with the tone and theme of the work, or do they clash? And then the next subcategory would be theme. Is there a strong, relevant meaning to the work, or does the work just deal with nebulous, unrelatable ideas that just sort of live in their own logic bubble? Is the theme integrated into every single aspect of the work, or does it just feel forcibly applied where the author tried to apply it? And then we got character acting. Do the characters speak their natural archetype strongly? Or is the author just writing every character like it's like their own self? Is the acting organic and information dense? Or is it just contrived and superficial? Is the aesthetic of the character acting what the Sekai Kan inherently suggests the aesthetic should be? Or is there like a mismatch between Sekai Kan and the way the characters are acting? Do they not feel like they fit that Sekai Kan? All right, and then the next big category would be like the visual art in anime, which is mostly going to be drawings and paintings. So we got our quality basics. Is the drawing or painting acknowledging proper perspective, or is it poorly structured? Is the gesture strong, if it's a character gesture, an environment gesture, or is it unbalanced and awkward? Is the color balance natural, or does it look flat? And then we got acting, character acting, just like in writing. Does the gesture and expression carry all the information of a real-world human? Or does it feel like unnatural and lazily contrived? Do the character gestures and expressions have aesthetic synergy with the style of directing, writing, and camera work? Or are they like out of harmony? Are they not like all coming together to do like one motion? Okay, and then we got the designs, like the visual designs, character design, setting designs. Is there enough detail in the character and setting designs to convey all the information that the story demands? Or are the designs not powerful enough to carry the weight of the story? Do the designs convey the archetypal significance of the characters and settings, or are they more like just kind of whimsical and superficial? Is there a strong aesthetic thread linking the setting and all the different characters together? Are they just sort of helter-skelter designs, just like whatever the hell, came to them at that moment without actually thinking about it properly? And then we got the topic of sound. Voice acting. Is the actor truly in character, or are they just going through superficial motions? Does the timbre of the voice articulate the organic idiosyncrasies of the character, or does it feel just like an uninspired casting? Is the aesthetic of the acting compatible with both the art style and writing style, or is it not acknowledging the type of delivery that the aesthetic demands? And then we got music. Is the music evocative, or does it just sort of sit there? Are the tracks varied, and do they proactively add to each scene in which they are used, or do they just lazily match the superficial tone? Is the music customized to the aesthetic of the story and art, or is it generic? And then we got sound effects. Are there a wide variety of sound effects used, or do they have a few that just repeat too often? Are the sound effects powerfully mimicking the way we hear real-world sounds, or at least the way we feel like we hear real-world sounds? Or do they come off unconvincing? Are there interesting, unique sound effects in the case of a story that demands original sound effects, or they're just using like generic ass sounds instead? All right, and then finally, the last broad topic is directing, which I'm including storyboard with. Now, the storyboard. Trigger has said that the storyboard determines like 75-ish% over the overall quality. And this is pretty intuitive, since the storyboard like determines like composition, sequencing, and like most, if not all, of the timing. So after the script, that's the entire blueprint. So the questions you want to ask for that are like, are the compositions meaningful, or are they just chaotic and random? Do the compositions articulate the action and the aesthetic, or do they just miss the information demanded by the script and designs? Are the shots sequenced in an engaging way that adds synergy between shots, or did they just sort of string the shots together randomly? Okay, and then the director is really responsible for making sure that what is done initially is the right thing. So did the project start out on the right foot, or was there a fatal flaw at the planning stage that should have been weeded out? And then the director puts it all together. Like, is the acknowledgement of synergy present throughout every stage of the project? Because you got to remember, synergy is what the vast majority of any great work's quality. Now, a note on the concept of like overall quality, because unlike the specific anatomy of a piece of work in which the quality, the anatomy being the writing, the visual art, blah, 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 the overall quality cannot be deduced empirically like those can. It's more or less arbitrarily calculated. In other words, if I have two shows, an educated critic can definitely say like which show had the better animation ultimately, taking everything into account. But it's going to be a lot harder to say which work is ultimately superior. It's very similar to trying to say like, oh, is this Pokemon species superior to this Pokemon species? Because if you look at the anatomy of a Pokemon circa 1996, it's really just, you got type, move pool, and stats, and that's it. And much like a piece of art, these things have to work in synergy. So a highest attack stat is literally useless for a Pokemon that doesn't have like useful moves that utilize the attack stat. So I can go through each component of the anatomy of a Pokemon and rate its contribution to the overall quality of that Pokemon. But like, it becomes really difficult to say which Pokemon is explicitly and cleanly superior to another. What I can do is organize the Pokemon into like tiers and say that like an S tier Pokemon is definitely superior to like a B tier Pokemon. But is every S tier Pokemon explicitly and cleanly better than like an A tier Pokemon? Well, not necessarily. I mean, there's contexts in which the A tier Pokemon might be more useful, so you can't really say that the S tier is explicitly and cleanly better. There's literally like a YouTube channel out there devoted to saying, oh, how good is a certain Pokemon species overall, and it's not simple what goes into this dude calculating this shit. Judging art accurately is the same way, except like way more complicated. And let me tell you, a lot of fucking dudes out there like throwing these numbers on shit, they are not even close to good enough to be doing this accurately. A critical analysis is when you examine the language components of the work and you examine how well they communicated what they were supposed to communicate. You need a good handle on the identity of the work, insofar that you can judge how well it conveyed that identity. Quality loss only can come from two places: a lack of establishment of the initial identity was not established enough, or the language used was not strong enough, it was not articulate enough to convey this identity. And you got to note that a non-artist is going to have a hell of a time doing this properly. Like, an artist sees art differently. They see the grit, they see all the little things that go into the quality. A writer reads differently, a musician hears differently. And if you ever had work on a comprehensive project, you get a sense of the directing behind it. If you haven't had these experiences, if you don't have these skills developed, it's not going to happen. You can't get gritty. You can only be like really broad, and even then you're probably going to fuck shit up. And yet these non-artist critics out there somehow feel like they're skilled enough to slap a number rating on something. And let me tell you, a number rating, an accurate number rating, that's a difficult job for even the most comprehensively skilled artist. So then there's another type of analysis, which is significance analysis, where the main focus is on the identity itself and the role it plays in history, culture, and the individuals involved with it. And a lot of people can't tell the difference between a significance analysis and a critical analysis, and they sort of just mix the two together whimsically, which is retarded. And there's another thing that a lot of, dumbass reviewers will spread, which is the sort of myth of preference. It's this notion that, like, preference is just this chaotic salad for everyone. Like, this guy likes this and he likes this. It's just random. There's no rhyme or reason to why they like, say this guy really likes like dark stuff. Like, it's just random. Just anyone can have that preference. Not true. Preference comes from identity. And identity is not random. The identity of every single individual human being corresponds to some combination of a predefined set of archetypes, much like the artworks themselves. Artworks parallel human beings. You can also have false preferences, however. And false preferences are born out of fear, immaturity, and confusion. All things that like put distance between you and your identity. And you can tell a false preference because you'll notice that there's fear behind it, or confusion, or immaturity. So there's another important note here, and that some identities are more easily communicated to all demographics at large, while others have an easier time with just the demographic they're meant for. And this brings up the notion of inclusive versus exclusive language, which is the whole next fucking video. And let me tell you, it is important, especially in regards to anime, because it is extremely relevant to anime and otaku. So that is the next fucking video. So let's go through some of the types of challenges a critic is going to have to tackle when critically analyzing a work. So one very common example is you're going to have to identify examples where the language components are strong in a work, but the core identity is just like shaky. And a great example of this is Hyoka. So every single aspect of Hyoka is at least strong, except it's all built on a questionable core identity. An adaptation of a 10-year-old regular novel as opposed to a light novel that definitely didn't have anime in mind at the time of writing. I mean, I guess the emphasis on like youth kind of definitely comes through in Kyoto Animation's version and certain aspects of like the local culture and stuff, but the rest is just not translating well to the visual audio style of the dudes who had just adapted some of the most like anime as fuck works the previous decade. The characters clash with their visual designs constantly, despite these designs making the strongest effort they could to match the characters' traits in writing. The aesthetic of the animation just really doesn't capture the corny white bread aesthetic of the original novel, despite efforts on KyoAni's part to like ham up a lot of the acting. And you got Yasuhiro Takamoto as director, and his like harsh, sarcastic, gritty style just really has nothing to do with the script's like forgiving, prude, and simplistic nature. Thus, we're left with a work where the individual components of quality are strong enough for the show to definitely qualify as a very good, maybe great show, but the identity is just too compromised for the show to be considered a general masterpiece. And then we got identifying situations where the writing is kind of bringing down the entire work, even if it's just to an extent, or at least keeping it from being like the godlike status it could have achieved. My favorite example for this is Shinseki Evangelion, which I'm sure you all you bitches know. All you faggots. Although I plan on making an entire video for fucking Evangelion, because all the ones out there, and there are a lot out there, they're all shit. This will just be, this is just quick. It's very brief. So in Shinseki Evangelion TV, the entire script starts going more and more to shit in the final third of the show, despite the fact that those final third episodes are really dope overall. But it really starts accelerating the rate of decay by episode 20. And then you got Misato, arguably like the most important character in the entire story after Shinji, who's like already suffering as a Misato from like lack of proper articulation of her character. She just gradually mutates into like an entirely different character while like part-timing as a detective. You got Asuka, who just starts to slip into mental decay with no real articulation of the reasons why. You got some forced kind of jealousy stuff going on. And then, you know, some reverse Deus Ex Machina shit with the angel that pollutes her mind and stuff. But, like, the depiction of the factors that go into this in the past and present, the shit that's supposed to pain her, it's just overly simplified and really is not conveying the level of, like, idiosyncratic detail you need when justifying something like a complete character mental breakdown. It's really just not enough. It just comes off feeling melodramatic. You got Rey, who just sort of fades into, like, this bizarre philosophical obscurity, having no real ultimate goal in regards to Shinji or the main plot. And then we get some like just really hammy adult romance crap between, like, Gendo and Ritsuko, and you're just like, what the fuck? That really has nothing to do with anything. And then finally, both the movie and the show get stirred into, like, a bizarre fourth wall breaking rant. And that's not even addressing half of the problems with the script. So every other aspect of Evangelion TV stays strong as fuck, for the most part, even though the script is dissolving, which is actually very impressive. So we can definitely call it a great show overall. But it is definitely not comparable to, like, the Rebuild series, which not only fixed all these problems, but improved on every single other aspect, with the exception of the ugly-ass 3D. So now a good significance analysis is one that is aware on the inherent significance level, as in, like, breaking apart a work into its archetypal components and examining what those have to do with real life. Cultural significance level, as in understanding the cultural context in which the work was created and then publicly received, and the effects that work had on the culture and the cultural trend it reflected. And then the personal significance, as in, like, what does a work reveal about the person or people who created it, and what is particularly culturally relevant about this person or these people. Like, you know, can you watch Higurashi and pick up on the inherent relationship that material has with the concept of, like, Bishoujo Moe and relate that to the culture at the time it was written? Can you articulate the complex network of character foils in Berserk and relate it back to research you've done on Kentaro Miura, his life, his personality, and then relate that back to otaku culture in general? How about the works of Mangaka 1 and, like, what they reflect about current dilemma that a lot of otaku face today? Can you examine the inherent metaphorical significance of the Mahou Shoujo genre and how it manifests in, like, every Mahou Shoujo work? Mecha genre, card game genre, shonen battle, harem battle. Like, there's so many fucking nooks and crannies in this otaku media shit, and you should not trust anyone who is oversimplifying things by regurgitating something they slurped up on the nets or formed a half-baked conclusion from their incomplete knowledge and comprehension of both anime and life in general. Jikai. I will be making another crash course on the difference between exclusive language and inclusive language, which I hinted at in this video, and the relationship that those things have with anime and otaku. And I have booked some of the most beloved anime characters of all time to help me illustrate these concepts in the next video, so you do not want to miss it. Kimi wa Toki no Namida.